I think they just wanted to make sure that I was just living. I got my exit stamp on my passport.
Right.
Sorry, can I ask? I think if you have visa at the border of Pakistan or Iran, Afghanistan, is no problem because they are border and they are cooperated. So very easily to pass the border. So they just look at visa. They don't ask you where you from, why you are here, and so it's not a kind of problem.
Yeah, what I did, I had an Indian visa stamp on my passport as an excuse, because they always curious, what are you doing here? No, I'm just backpacking all my way to India. And I haven't been to India yet, but I got my visa stamped on my passport. Yeah, it's the only way to visit those regions, I think.
Thank you very much indeed.
So
that's an incredible story. But because you are one of the very few journalists or reporters who've been able to make that kind of journey, I think it's dreadfully important that you make known everything that you discovered and publicize it to the maximum possible. Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to ask René Wadlow to join us. He's the main Geneva UN representative for the Association of World Citizens, former professor from University of Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. I'd like to build briefly on our comments from our Amnesty colleague on campaigning, because I think that our meeting here together, which has been a very rich exchange, is of value only if it is a step towards effective work at the national levels and here at the United Nations. And my experience is basically with, if you like, campaigning or lobbying at the United Nations. And so I'd like to very briefly look at some of the issues, basically Pakistan-related issues that have been raised at the UN, human rights bodies, the Commission, and actually less now the Council, but the experience with the Commission for what's sometimes called lessons learned. That is, that what can we learn from earlier Pakistan-oriented activities that may be of use to the Baloch efforts. And I'd like to begin just by saying, in a sense, two key things. One is that in the UN system, it is not the seriousness of the situation which opens the door to the issue being taken up and action. It is primarily political weights, and there are many areas of the world where the issues are not brought up for political reasons. And so one has to analyze what are the efforts of one government or another to raise or to diminish an issue. And you get, this is in a sense one form of analysis that we have to look at. The second thing is continuity. That is, it is not enough, unfortunately, to have this seminar here this year and expect that next year people will remember the seminar and say, let us take it up. Sort of very sadly, in the beginning, in the early 80s, there was created a working group on indigenous peoples. It was created because people hoped that they could, in a sense, hit at the United States and Canada without any fear. And when I raised the Chittagong Hill Tract issue of Bangladesh, the Indians jumped up, and the Bangladesh jumped up, and all the Asians jumped up and said, no, those aren't what we mean by indigenous people. Finally, I won in quotes because the only convention on indigenous peoples is an ILO convention which says indigenous and tribal. And one could argue, I did argue, that the Chittagong Hill Tracts were tribal, they were not indigenous, they had migrated over 1,000 years from southern China or Tibet. So one of the things that one has to know, and we'll pick up that again, is what exists in terms of, as it were, international law, both within the human rights efforts, but also what exists in terms of freedom of association, etc. Under ILO conventions. One has to know what is possible in terms of cultural rights from UNESCO. And in a sense, one has to have this broad vision of the various avenues that one can pick up, because, as I said with the Chittagong Hill Tracts, it was because of the ILO convention that the working group had to take it up. And ultimately, in part, because of the work that was done, and the Bangladesh government would send each year the same high-ranking secretary. I used to joke that if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't have an August vacation in Geneva. But it ultimately did lead to a reasonable ceasefire agreement in Bangladesh and the return of refugees from northeast India to the Chittagong Hill Tracts, etc. The situation is still troubled and there are problems, etc. But it is one example of the ways in which work in Geneva does have an impact on the ground, because very often one feels that one is in a black hole, that is, you speak and nothing happens. So I'd like to look very quickly at the Pakistan-related issues that have been raised. The one from way back has been Kashmir. Both at the non-governmental level, there have been strong Kashmiri groups all saying different things. There have been Indian related Kashmiris, there have been Pakistan related Kashmiris, there have been independent Kashmir related people, all coming, all arguing among themselves or refusing to speak to each other. As a result, the Pakistan government and the Indian government have brought very high-level people to speak on the Kashmir issue. The first year that Benazir Bhutto was Prime Minister, she came and gave a very strong, emotional speech, which was then answered by the Indians, etc., etc. A couple of years later, Sheikh Abdullah, who was the head of the Kashmir government, came. It was just a year when I was organizing a seminar on autonomy and problems of autonomy. Sheikh Abdullah came, so the whole thing turned into a Kashmir-oriented thing, because all the Indian diplomats came to see what he was going to say, for fear that he was going to go beyond what the Indian government was saying. But Kashmir very often was so conflictual between India and Pakistan that everybody else phased out. In a sense, it used up all the available psychic energy that was available in the Commission around the Kashmir issue. And of course, the Kashmir issue is still with us, and the the inability, either at the non-governmental level or at the governmental level, to move towards negotiations, discussions, etc., in good faith, is extremely sad. And so we're not going to discuss the Kashmir issue, but that has been the most, the strongest one, both in terms of non-governmental people coming of good level but with different views, and the government people. All the other issues have been raised by non-governmental people, usually, I don't want to say necessarily hostile, but nevertheless in opposition to the Pakistan delegation. And that's the other lesson I think that's important to look at as we discuss strategy, is one must never underestimate the opposition. Pakistan has a good and sometimes very good diplomatic corps. The Pakistan diplomats speak English well, they are educated, they are clever, and they know how the system works. In addition, Pakistan has been, the last few years, leading the organization of the Islamic Conference. And so they have not only the Arab and South Asian Islamic world with them, they also have a good number of sub-Saharan African countries who support the Pakistan government position, not necessarily understanding it very well, but by the solidarity of the Islamic Conference. Plus, Pakistan is supported by the Chinese government, in part as a counterweight to India for its own reasons. But China whole is the gatekeeper for anything dealing with Asia. Nothing can be done on Asia without the blessing of the Chinese. And the Chinese are, as many countries are, motivated by their own national interest. I've worked on the Burma issue a good deal. It is the Chinese who control how far a special rapporteur can go, what else can be done on Burma, etc. So Pakistan has, in a sense, three major cards. Its capacity